Good morning, everyone. Our reading this morning is called A Litany for Those Who Aren't Ready for Healing. It's by the Reverend Dr. Yolanda Pierce. Let us not rush to the language of healing before understanding the fullness of the injury and the depth of the wound. Let us not rush to offer a Band-Aid when the gaping wound requires surgery and complete reconstruction. Let us not offer false equivalencies, thereby diminishing the particular pain being felt in a particular circumstance, in a particular historical moment. Let us not speak of reconciliation without speaking of reparations and restoration, or how we can repair the breach and how we can restore the loss. Let us not rush past the loss of this mother's child, this father's child, someone's beloved son. Let us not value property over people. Let us not protect material objects while human lives hang in the balance. Let us not value a false peace over a righteous justice. Let us not be afraid to sit with the ugliness, the messiness, and the pain that is life in community together. Let us not offer cliches to the grieving, those whose hearts are being torn asunder. Instead, let us mourn Black and brown men and women, those killed extrajudiciously every 28 hours. Let us lament the loss of a teenager dead at the hands of a police officer who described him as a demon. Let us weep at the criminal justice system, which is neither blind nor just. Let us call for the mourning men and the wailing women, those willing to rend their garments of privilege and ease and sit in the ashes of this nation's original sin. Let us be silent when we don't know what to say. Let us be humble and listen to the pain, rage, and grief pouring from the lips of our neighbors and friends. Let us decrease so that our brothers and sisters who live on the underside of history may increase. Let us pray with our eyes open and our feet firmly planted on the ground. Let us listen to the shattering glass and let us smell the purifying fires, for it is the language of the unheard. God, in your mercy, show me my own complicity in injustice. Convict me for my indifference. Forgive me when I have remained silent. Equip me with a zeal for righteousness. Never let me grow accustomed or acclimated to unrighteousness. Several years ago, I went to a rally outside City Hall in Boston. The Supreme Court had just struck down laws in Massachusetts that required a buffer zone between abortion clinics and those who were protesting them. And this meant that now protesters could get as close to the clinics and their patients as they wanted. And so hundreds of people showed up on short notice in support of the clinics, wanting to find something they could do to help. The rally was emceed by Ayanna Pressley, whose name now so many know as a member of the House of Representatives for Massachusetts, one of the members of the Squad. At the time, she was a city councilor in Boston, the first woman of color elected to the Boston City Council. At this rally, Ayanna Pressley introduced the speakers from various organizations and parts of the local government. But in between the speakers, she also talked to us. She told us how her friends were nervous about the way she was so outspoken, how they had tried to convince her not to MC this rally. People will think of you as an angry Black woman, they told her. And Pressley looked out over this crowd of hundreds who had gathered in support of reproductive rights. And she said, you know what? I am angry. And given everything that's happening, I should be angry. I will not hide my anger. And in that moment, the crowd cheered wildly, and I was absolutely stunned. I've thought about this moment so many times since it happened, what it was like to see a Black woman proudly claim her anger in front of a crowd. And it's hard for me to admit that it was shocking for me, but honestly, it was. It is so rare for me to see a woman of color championing her right and her responsibility to be angry. And perhaps even more rare is seeing a large crowd gathered who cheer for that right and responsibility. Being at that rally that day inspired me to work towards reclaiming my own anger. Generally, I'm a person who's very in touch with her feelings. I know how to talk about and show what I'm feeling, and I know that even when it's inconvenient, it's usually better for me and for the people around me if I take some time to acknowledge and feel my feelings. But I'm still learning how to talk about and show my anger. And sometimes I'm even learning how to feel it at all. There was a time when I thought that maybe I just didn't get angry very much. I would get frustrated, annoyed, upset. And I realized that those were all words I used to try to soften anger, to make it more palatable to the world. When I felt angry, I would try to turn it into something else, to pass it off as a different emotion, one that was more socially acceptable. I think this is largely because I've been socialized as a woman, told by society that I'm supposed to be calm and gentle and nurturing, not angry. And on top of that, I have a sometimes subconscious and sometimes conscious worry about being seen as the angry Black woman, just like Ayanna Pressley talked about. And so I tamped down and compartmentalized my anger to the point where I thought I just didn't feel it very often. In this society, so many people are told implicitly and explicitly that they are not allowed to be angry. Non-binary folks, genderqueer people, and women, especially folks of color, are told that anger is unbecoming, that they cannot express the things that make them angry, even if most of the world is making them angry most of the time. In general, we don't encourage anyone to feel and express their anger in healthy ways. We think of anger as something destructive, something that happens when we can't control ourselves. And the more we are taught to avoid it and to push it aside, the more destructive it becomes when we do finally let it out. And then this just reinforces the idea that anger is a bad thing. But being present with Ayanna Pressley that day as she claimed her anger reminded me that anger is an emotion, and emotions are nuanced and complicated. They're never cut and dry. And so I've been working to reclaim my anger, noticing and naming the things that make me angry. Not frustrated, not annoyed, not upset, but angry. And I've been working on feeling and expressing that anger rather than compartmentalizing it or ignoring it. And once I notice my anger and feel it and express it, I try to turn it into a force for good, a benevolent rage. I encountered that phrase, benevolent rage, in a poem by Rebecca Parker called Choose to Bless the World. And I don't think it has left the back of my mind since I first read it. That phrase, benevolent rage, seems a little bit like an oxymoron. Benevolence conjures up these images of kindness, gentleness, and good-heartedness, and rage evokes powerful anger, maybe even violence. Benevolence is something we strive for. Rage is something we try to avoid. How can rage be benevolent? This contradiction can be jarring for us. And still, it is a powerful thing, benevolent rage. It is the opposite of apathy, the opposite of indifference. Rage is the wake-up call. It's the anger that drives us to action. Benevolence is the way we respond to that call. Benevolent rage fuels justice. When I was in high school, crosses were burned on lawns across my town, and I was scared, but I was also angry. And when local and national politicians pass laws that affect the most vulnerable people among us, I'm frustrated, but I am also angry. And when people are killed by the police or by white supremacists, I grieve, and I am also angry. I am angry at the systems of racism and oppression that are deeply embedded in the foundations of this country. I'm angry at the power of the state, of the government, of the lack of empathy that many lawmakers seem to have towards anyone who is not like them. I'm angry at the lack of accountability in all our systems. This anger is righteous and it is holy, and it leads me to actions that are far less selfish and far more compassionate than my actions might otherwise be. Benevolent rage says that what is going on is not okay, that we will not accept this as the status quo, that we cannot sit idly by. My rage fuels the work that I do, and it does that in ways that simply being aware of what's happening or being frustrated by it just can't do. My rage motivates me. It connects me with other people who are also outraged and who are figuring out what to do about it. It prods me to make that call, go to that meeting, reach out to that person, show up to that action. It pushes me to work just a little harder, reach just a little farther, dig my heels in just a little deeper. Anger is a powerful emotion. It's just as necessary as sadness and joy and love. It lights a fire in our souls and calls us to do the work that must be done so that we can all get free. In the same part of Choose to Bless the World in which she talks about benevolent rage, Parker also names a holy disturbance and a revolutionary love that show up to remind us that which is sacred will not be defiled. Justice will be fought for, and it will be won. Now, justice is not a magical thing that floats down from the sky or appears out of nowhere. And as much as we like to think otherwise sometimes, justice doesn't come gently. It doesn't come from nice people doing a lot of nice things. Justice comes from love, but fierce love. Mama bear love, that kind of love where you grab on and you don't let go until it's better. Love that is fueled by disturbance, by rage, and by revolution. There's a reflection in prayer by the Reverend Sean Parker Dennison from the newsletter Braver Riser that really resonates with me. And though he never mentions the phrase benevolent rage, I think the words in the prayer are calling on the same idea. Spirit of justice, Dennison prays, help us be courageous and committed in these times. Let us transform our ideals into action, our words into deeds. Let the fire of our passion burn with both light and warmth. In our anger, help us embody the spirit of creative destruction, always making room for more justice, more compassion, more love. May it be so. May we be the ones who make it so. Anger that transforms our ideals into actions, our words into deeds, anger that embodies the spirit of creative destruction, making room for more justice, more compassion, more love, that is benevolent rage. Now, like the term benevolent rage, the idea of creative destruction might give you a little bit of pause. We are often quick to believe that destruction is bad, any form that it takes. Nothing good can come from fire. Nothing good can come from demolition and from tearing things down. But I think that mindset only works if we also believe that nothing bad can ever be constructed, that nothing bad is ever built or raised up. If destruction is always bad, then things that exist must be good, not worth tearing down or getting rid of in order to start again. But we know that unjust systems are built all the time. We're surrounded by them. So it is time. It is time to engage in creative destruction, to tear down the parts of our society that are painful and unjust and harmful, to evaluate the building blocks of our society and decide what is worth keeping. It is time, as my favorite band Delta Ray says in one of their songs, to get our hands dirty. We can't tear down the patriarchy without getting our hands dirty. We can't pull up the roots of white supremacy without getting our hands dirty. We can't dismantle homophobia or transphobia or xenophobia without getting our hands dirty. We can't disassemble ableism without getting our hands dirty. The world we dream about, the beloved community that we long for, cannot simply be built next to and within and among the pieces of the current world. There is too much that is broken. There is too much that is painful and unjust. And so we must tear down, dismantle, burn away, engaging in creative destruction in order to be able to build just, loving community. So I invite you to take a moment to think about what makes you feel angry. There is not a lack of trigger in the world today, from the global to the local to the personal. When we pay attention, sometimes it's actually harder not to feel angry than it is to feel angry. And this can be overwhelming, and it can feel better to pull away and ignore things that make us angry. But I invite you instead to lean into your anger, to feel it, acknowledge it, know that it is real and justified and fierce. And so this is not just a thing I'm saying. I want you right now to think about the things that make you angry. I'll give you just a moment to bring one to mind. Okay, do you have something or maybe many things that make you angry? Now hold on to that anger and ask yourself, how can I channel that anger to be a force for justice? How can I hone that anger into a tool that serves the broader good? How is my anger calling me? If you're angry about people or propositions on the ballot, then go out and knock on doors and make phone calls and send postcards to make sure people are educated about the issues and about how to vote. If you are angry about police brutality, then go to actions and rallies if that is safe. Listen to the people who are most targeted about what they think is best. If you're angry about the attack on reproductive rights, then volunteer at a clinic or donate money to groups that buy things like vests for clinic volunteers. If you're angry about ICE imprisoning people who have immigrated to this country, then show up outside ICE offices and detention centers. Donate to pay those exorbitant bonds that get set to get people out of detention. Drive people to court appointments. If you're angry about people getting away with abuse, then volunteer at a local shelter. Speak up when someone says something inappropriate. Teach the children in your life about consent and boundaries. And don't just sit at home, angry, when story after story gets discussed on the news and not do anything about it. Feel your anger at systemic oppression and use it to help keep yourself in the fight. Feel your fury at being made to feel helpless and use it to get yourself involved. Feel your rage at the ways people treat each other and use it to bring justice into the world. We should be angry. We have every right and a responsibility to feel and show our anger. Our anger is powerful and useful and necessary. Not being angry in the face of injustice is being complacent. And complacency allows the status quo to continue when it is unjust and painful. Anger equips us with the zeal for righteousness that the Reverend Dr. Pierce talks about in the litany I read earlier. And how you use that zeal, that benevolent rage, and that creative destruction, well, that is up to you. Amen.